Do you remember your first time playing a Zelda game? How it felt? What you were thinking? And how it changed? Not everyone entered into the series with the same game. If you're a zoomer, you might have started with Spirit Tracks, and if you're a boomer like me, Ocarina of Time on the N64 would be a good guess. No matter where you started, I imagine the childlike sense of adventure gained from each game is consistent. That is, if you were a kid and not a jaded old man when you played your first game. To me, Ocarina of Time was not just my first Zelda game, but my first video game. It was the game that came with my N64 and the game I spent hours playing and experiencing. A game that I kept coming back to and would change as I grew along with it. And considering I'm still talking about video games on the internet, we really didn't grow up too much. I remember first watching my friend play this mysterious game he picked up from Blockbuster. We were skipping over rocks, throwing rocks, cutting grass, basically causing all types of property damage. Almost everything you could imagine doing outside, but virtually. Maybe there was a little more you could do outside. But yeah, it was cold outside, so I'd rather stay inside. At the time, this was a living, breathing world with people and houses, and a cover band that would follow you everywhere you went, playing the sickest tunes this side of the forest. When I finally got the game for Christmas along with my N64, my first adventure had just begun. I wasn't just watching it like a Disney movie. I was experiencing it how I wanted to, by solving the puzzles, exploring the world, and fighting the monsters. Just me and Zelda. Yeah, I kinda named Link Zelda for a good 5 years before I found out. Hey, I'm Zelda.
OMG, I'm Zelda too!
I've come from the future. Did I hear a Zelda party going on? My father named me after the hero Zelda.
Wait a minute, what is this? The Legend of Zelders? We have the Zelda of Wisdom, the Zelda of Courage. Don't tell me Ganondorf's middle name is Zelda. Or should I say Ganon Z-Dorf? The world I was thrown in was the most magical part of the experience. Like, come on, 3 Zeldas? Who would have thunk? Each region with its own unique geography, only restricted by obviously conquerable roadblocks, leaving you wondering, what is behind those rocks? Or what is behind that fat man? Oh my god, forget I asked. Aside from one special case, it never takes long to dispatch of these roadblocks. And once you do, you learn how all the geographies are connected, making travel from, let's say, the forest to Goron City and Zora's River simple. I love it when games do that. Traveling through mountain trails and aquatic caves would have been amazing enough, but what really complemented the experience were the races of beings inhabiting each area. Their physical characteristics complementing their locations perfectly, so well that the future games in the series took and refined their designs. However, the social dynamics and structure of these kingdoms were not completely fleshed out besides the most basic elements.
I'm a big rock guy, I eat rocks.
But it really didn't have to. The strong designs and the very small amount of lore that did exist drove interest in the world. Keeping everything vague and mysterious only feeds our imaginations, especially as a kid, almost complementing the adventure. They lead to theories like, I wonder what happens when I take a burning stick to the middle platform. Nothing happens, nothing at all. I found out the hard way. Or questions like, which Zoras are guys and which are girls? Because they all look like guys, and that leaves me very concerned for them.
Welcome to the most miserable place in Hyrule for lovers. Here, where single men sit around all day, it seems, with nothing to do. You come across them everywhere, listless and hopeless.
Although I didn't, read all the text, I did understand the story, and what I didn't understand or missed interested me on the second or third playthrough. Like this guard giving his last dying messages in the alleys of Hyrule Town.
Oh my fucking god, she fucking dead.
That being said, even my dyslexic and attention deficit little butt knew it was time to sit still and listen when I opened the door of time and pulled the Master Sword.
Oh my god! Wow!
Wow, unreal. My gosh. This is amazing! I feel incredible! Yes, 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 yes! I can win! I feel great! I can do this! Ugh.
I vividly remember Raru talking about finding and awakening the 5 other sages. After going to bed that night, I couldn't sleep. My brain was just firing off with possible locations these sages could be hiding. One of the possible locations I thought of was the ledge above the shop in Kokiri Forest. You know, instead of the mysterious entrance at the end of the Lost Woods like any reasonable person. At the time I even thought they would all be old men like Raru. I was actually ahead of the curve on that one because that's what ended up happening in Twilight Princess. My childlike mind is what probably made this adventure so grand. I could only think of the simplest answers to mysteries, which shocked and bewildered me when my low expectations were exceeded. Like the Fire Temple Sage is not an old man, but my big brother Darunia. Yeah, I beat the Fire Temple first. I must have skipped the text of people telling me to go to the forest. Even when the temple entrances were in plain sight, I was still shocked as I thought I explored the world extensively. Like when the Nocturne of Shadow took me to the graveyard, I was floored for the first time. I was a child and finding out this ritualistic dungeon entrance was right in front of me this whole time was amazing. None of it felt recycled. The areas had changed enough with new places introduced to make for a fresh second journey through Hyrule. As I conquered every dungeon, I made my way to Ganondorf's castle. With my pockets full of items, a horse, 1 wife, and 3 side chicks, I knew I was ready to save Hyrule. This was a bona fide childhood adventure. And don't give me that crap that it was good for its time. Because when my friend's little brother had the option to pick any game from the Xbox to the PS4, he chose this game. A child's eyes full of imagination and awe can see past the graphical limitations and experience the same sense of wonder I did that maybe an adult may not see. But you know, kids also enjoy flicking door stoppers for hours. That was basically my first experience with the game. But being the guy I am and loving this game so much, I had a second experience. And then, you know...
Another one. Another one. Another one. And another one.
I've probably completed Ocarina of Time over 15 times. Most of them being 100% runs. Not as impressive as someone like ZFG, but I'm not a speedrunner.
My favorite glitch is Wong Warp.
What I did realize is the grand adventure doesn't really stay too grand on the 4th time around. Hyrule Field is empty, Epona isn't that useful, and everyone just loves telling their favorite triangle story. But why would I continue to play a game that has lost its adventure? That is because Ocarina of Time is a surprisingly good collectathon, and I love me a good collectathon. Now you might be thinking, Ocarina of Time, a collectathon? You can't even jump! Well, you auto-jump and backflips might count. If not, that doesn't matter. Who said collectathons require you to jump? Snake Pass is considered a collectathon where you play as a snake and slither around up and over obstacles, but at no point do you jump. That's because snakes don't jump. So what exactly makes up a collectathon and how can it apply to Ocarina of Time? Based on hours of research conducting peer-reviewed studies and experiments, I have deduced that a good collectathon must contain these 2 features. A constant stream of collectibles, no shit, and dynamic and interesting gameplay to reach said collectibles. So let's begin with the collectibles by first looking at a basic example with Banjo-Kazooie. In Banjo-Kazooie, you are tasked in collecting 100 Jiggies, 900 music notes, 24 honeycomb pieces, and 17 new moves. A whole lot of stuff. So let's look at what Ocarina of Time brings to the table. 9 sacred thingamajigs, 12 songs, 36 heart pieces and 8 heart containers, 59 items and upgrades, and 100 golden sculptulas. And if we tally them up, okay, hear me out. I spent a lot of time gushing over Ocarina of Time, so I'm sticking to my guns here. Just because there aren't as many collectibles as Banjo-Kazooie or other collectathons, doesn't mean it's lacking. I would argue that the worth and feeling of reward of each collectible in Ocarina of Time eclipses that of other collectathons. And again, I'm only speaking from the perspective of someone who has 100%ed the game many times, knowing the locations and puzzles needed to obtain each collectible. Which brings me to my next point. When you do know every item location, you never go too long without picking up another item along your journey, which is the main appeal of a collectathon, the constant dopamine hits, better described as the feeling of satisfaction from picking up an item and hearing that comforting jingle or sound effect. And it feels so good every time. Finally, the inventory is the perfect tracker for completion as it outlines everything you'll need to collect right from the beginning with blank spaces, really making for a satisfying experience when every space is full and you have a complete row of heart containers. Now that I have made my point about collectibles, let's move on to the next category, the fun and engaging gameplay. When you play at least a good collectathon, it should be fun to jump around, walk around and interact with the virtual world you are in. If the process of getting the collectibles is not fun, then chances are people won't want to collect them. So, if a collectible falls in the woods and nobody gives a damn to collect it, is it a collectible? I'm reaching here, but the question is whether or not the gameplay in Ocarina of Time is fun. And that's where I will argue Ocarina of Time's greatest strength is. I wouldn't continue to play this game if it was an endless slog around the world. Aside from the brain damage we give Link on his trips through Hyrule, or for the particularly brave backwalkers, movement and combat in Ocarina of Time is, in my opinion, fun. Some might be quick to point out an excessive amount of waiting, and that may be true for a novice player. However, again, I'm simply speaking from a more experienced player's perspective.
I'm gonna do what's called a pro gamer move.
A player that knows and is always learning how to use all the items given to him to turn the tide of battle. Or I've just gotten used to waiting. But I do know how to use Deku Nuts at least. A very useful item to stun enemies and even defeat some enemies instantly. Warp Songs and Furore's Wind are also useful movement aids which can be used to limit backtracking. When I replay Ocarina of Time and my run doesn't end after getting the Master Sword, the worst part of the game for me is the ending stretch to defeat Ganon. On my first playthrough, I ascended the spiral staircase, edging ever closer to the haunting organ music. I felt the rush of the final climax, the culmination of this epic adventure. But on repeat playthroughs, it is a slog, and that's probably because the collection aspect is done, aside from 2 upgrades. You have all the items, what more is there to do other than complete trials and defeat Ganon? I'm not saying that each of the sages needs to give me a cookie for freeing them. Well, who am I kidding? That's exactly what I'm saying. The problem with freeing the stages is it's not gratifying. How did they even get trapped in eggs surrounded by their own respective magic? And when you do complete the tedious ice physics block pushing puzzle and free them, their magic fades with an eerie sound effect. Now if the magic turned on with a better sound effect, maybe that would make for a more compelling feeling of progression. Like when Ganon gets blasted by the divine beasts in Breath of the Wild. Okay, that is one of the dumbest tangents that I have ever went on, but I do feel that the final trials are nothing more than busy works on repeat playthroughs. And I only complete them out of my completionist sense of obligation. Now this is probably just a unique way I have experienced the game over the years. For a glitch hunter or a speedrunner, Ocarina of Time has transformed from an epic adventure into the most intricate puzzle game, where new routes and glitches are being discussed and discovered with the end goal of beating the game as fast as possible with or without 100% completion. It's gotten to the point that they can use the mechanics of the game to change the very code of the game itself. Just wow! I can't even begin to explain this shit, so I'll link a video doing that for me in the description below. Maybe the term collectathon is just too all-encompassing. It's not a category mentioned on the box of most games. Banjo-Kazooie is an action-adventure platforming game, and most games have collectibles. I can say that it's the term that is most true to me. Someone that just wants to sit down and relax while I relive a favorite game of mine, while skipping my least favorite triangle cutscene. It's just interesting how a game can change genres depending on how the player plays it. And if I'm completely wrong here, there is a wonderful ROM hack called Banjo-Kazooie Jiggies of Time that makes Ocarina of Time a true collectathon platformer.